The RLA extended response is a very important part of the Reasoning Through Language Arts test. In fact, it counts as 20% of your total score. So you're scored on three traits, and we'll look at those three traits. You get a score of 0 to 2 on each trait, so you can get a total score of 6. Then that score is actually doubled and then computed into your RLA score. So trait 1 is creation of an argument and use of evidence. So the things that they're looking for in this first item that they're grading you on, they're looking at that you're taking the text, the arguments themselves that are presented in the Reasoning Through Language Arts extended response, and you're showing that you have a purpose for your argument, that you cite relevant evidence, not that you're paraphrasing or even spitting back out exactly what it says, but that you're saying this point is good because that point is bad because. And then analyze the issue and say that it's valid. Distinguish between those claims that actually have some meat to them, or the argument points that have meat to them, and those throwaway argument points that really don't have any grounds to be built upon. They're just assumptions. The second one is about your development of ideas and your organizational structure. Typically, you want your ideas to be well developed. Explain why this is good. Explain why that argument is bad. Elaborate upon them. Give more details. Contain a sensible progression. I see the reader, whoever it is, sees where you're going with each point. Make sure that you have a good flow to it. Typically, your form of your extended response will be an introduction where you make the statement which side is better. Then you start going through points. So when you make your introduction to say which side is better, give a reason why. Tell why that side is better. Then you need to start highlighting those points. This specific one is good because of this. It has better details. This one has more relevant information. And tell why it has more relevant information. Establish a structure that conveys the message and purpose of the response. So your first paragraph tells, you're going to say which side is better and why. Then you start going through the reasons why. And at the very end, you'll close out the argument with, so based on what I've just presented to you, this argument is better because of what I've just said. You also want to establish and maintain a formal style. You don't want to just say, hey, look over here, look at this. Make it affirmative. Don't just say, I think or I believe. You need to know these things. So state that you know. Specifically say, this one is better. This point is better. This fact has good value because, not an I think, but defend it on your life. And then choose specific words to deliver your ideas clearly. Make sure that the words that you use fit the argument. Words like ascertain is a really good word to use right there. The validity is a really good word to use, saying it's a valid point. Those are words that you need to use, but use them properly. Don't just throw in a big word just to say, ooh, look at me. I can throw in a big word. Use the word properly. The third trait you'll be graded on is clarity and command of standard English. So it's dealing with sentence structure, your paragraphs, and how they look. Now, don't get lost on paragraphs and go, oh, but I was told that paragraphs have to be between 8 and 10 sentences. Not in this specific case. You can have a paragraph of 3 sentences or 4 sentences. The main point is that each paragraph highlights one part, one trait, one argument. And so all of that deals with that or argument. That is the organization part of it. You also want to avoid wordiness, awkwardness. Make sure that your sentences have correct parallel structure. If they're telling and speaking, then they're reminding. All those things are action verbs, so they need to uh, link up together. Use transition words, and we'll look at those transition words here in a moment. And avoid bad sentences. Don't use run-on sentences or sentence fragments. Make sure your sentences make sense. Um, don't use or avoid frequently confused words or homonyms like your, Y-O-U-R, and Y-O-U apostrophe R-E are not the same. Or there, T-H-E-I-R, T-H-E-Y apostrophe R-E, and T-H-E-R-E are different words, and you need to make sure you use them correctly. Make sure your subjects and verbs agree. Are they singular? Are they plural? Your pronoun usage. It, the argument is an it. Or if the person speaking, if you know the gender of the person, he says or she says. But if you don't, just say the speaker of the second argument, or whoever. Placement of your modifiers. This is a very good argument. Don't say this is a good argument that is very. Make sure that your modifier is in the correct word. Capitalize what needs to be capitalized. If it's a town or a title, like a doctor or Mr. or the mayor so and so. Now, if you just said the mayor, lowercase. But if it's Mayor Stevens says in his argument that, then you do capitalize Mayor and Stevens. Use apostrophes and possessives correctly, and punctuation, especially the commas. Oh my goodness, yes. Um, they know, GED testing knows that you have 45 minutes to do this in, so they know you're going to have some errors. But it should not, what they say down here, it should not interfere with the comprehension of the argument. So if you misspell a word here or misspell a word there, as long as they can understand what you're trying to say, you'll be fine. So this is what you'll see as a student whenever you start out. You'll have a couple of tabs up here. You might have 4 tabs. It just depends. First argument, maybe your second argument's on the second tab, and then maybe the third tab is the actual question, which is not actually a question, but it tells you what you need to write. So you need to read both arguments first. Decide which one is the better argument. There is no correct answer here. Either argument could be better as long as you defend the way it is. You're basically serving as a judge. And as a judge, what you're doing is you're trying to determine which side makes the better argument. So you need to analyze both texts, determine which one is the stronger case, develop that argument, explain which one is better supported, use evidence. That is so important in this using of evidence. Why is it better? It's better because you like it. That's not very good evidence. It's better because it has better cited material. It has things in it that say, well, this study conducted by a researcher at the University of Arizona says something, whatever it says. That's really good, reliable evidence because it's a study. Make sure to type your response in the box. Your response should be between 4 and 7 paragraphs of 3 to 7 sentences each. So you can have a lot of sentences, you can have a few sentences, but anywhere between 4 and 7 paragraphs. But remember, the key thing is the first 10 to 15 minutes you need to read through both arguments. Then for the next 30, 25, write. And then for the last 5, you need to go back and reread and edit. And so you'll have a timer up here that'll tell you how much time you have left. Do not click this end test button unless you are completely through writing whatever it is you need to write. You have certain things, cut, copy, and paste. You don't want to cut, copy, and paste from the reading, though. Please do not do that. That just shows that you know how to spit things back out. And that's not what they want. This is mainly used if you have an argument in here, but you decide the argument needs to be further down in your writing instead of in the second paragraph, maybe in the 4th paragraph. But that's it. So here is one argument on game-based learning. And as you can see, it is from a professor. It's always good to look at a few things whenever you're doing this. The title of it, that's good. It's good to read the title. Game-based learning is merely a fad. So I know just based on the title that this author is not really supporting game-based learning, which you'll learn about game-based learning or e-learning as you get through the reading. But you can see the first one is opposing, so the second one probably is supporting. And you see the person here is Solomon Robles. He's a professor of education. So he is someone who is writing in a journal. He's a professional. He probably knows what he's talking about because he has EDD, which means he is a doctor. So that means he probably at least kind of knows what he's talking about. And you can see there are a couple of things just to highlight along the way. It talks about one 2013 study that students have completed the gamified experience. So there's a study. Now, you could highlight that, yes, he uses a study, but he doesn't say where the study is, if the study's been repeated, if it was a valid study, or if someone just developed this and it hasn't been able to repeat it. Here's another one, though. The prestigious magazine, The Economist. To him, it may be prestigious. To someone else, it may not be prestigious. So you could look at this verb or this adjective right here, prestigious, and say he's trying his best to make this sound fancier than it really is. Or maybe he's right. Maybe The Economist is a prestigious magazine, but he uses this word. He could have just said the magazine. But that kind of shows you his bias a little bit by using the word prestigious there. Here's your second one. Your second one is game-based learning, an effective training strategy. So the title again tells you, okay, this one is for game-based learning. Here's your person, Jeanette Morgan. She's a PhD as opposed to an EDD, which is an educational doctorate. It's still a doctorate, but it's not as good. I'm saying that because I'm biased. PhD is someone who has a doctorate and is professor of business at Saratoga State University. And it talks about innovative trends in the workplace. That's what this is from. So it says, executives are smart. Ooh, it's sucking up to them a little bit. So if we look down through here, it gives some information from the Entertainment Software Association, which who knows if that's a real agency or not. Maybe it is. It says the average gamer is 37 years old. Okay, that's an interesting piece of data. That's something you could look at. A 2012 report on game-based learning notes that the research evidence demonstrating positive. So there's another report. So unlike one-time training classroom, game-based learning is infinitely repeatable. So that's a good argument. Those are good arguments in this one. So from those two arguments, then you have a prompt. Analyze the two articles. In your response, you develop and explain how one position is better. It doesn't matter your opinion on this. You may play Candy Crush till you're blue in the face, or Fortnite, or Overwatch, or whatever you're playing, but you may say that the first argument is a better argument. It doesn't matter your opinion. Don't say I think or I believe. Just say it is. Incorporate relevant specific evidence from both sources, though. Talk about the first one, how it uses good pieces of evidence. Talk about the second one, how it uses studies from certain things. But use both of them to support your argument. You can say in the second one, they didn't do this, whatever it is. Highlight that. Tell me about it. Explain why. So the first thing they're looking for is they're looking for a claim. This is a really long one from a different argument, and it goes all the way through this piece of evidence and that piece of evidence. The first argument states this, the second argument states that, but way down here in the green, this is the claim. Typically, your claim needs to be in the first paragraph. So what I would suggest is, say, the game-based learning one that we have. Game-based learning is a new trend in education. That would be a first sentence. Some people support it. Some people are opposed to it and say that it's just a fad. That could be a second sentence and a third sentence. But based on the two arguments, I feel that, whichever argument you say, argument one, argument two, whichever one, is better because it has more valid research. Whatever the reason is, that's what you go with. So that should be way up here toward the end of the first paragraph, which may only be 3 sentences, 4 sentences, but you're making that claim. You're saying this side is better and telling why. Then you start going through the specifics of why. So, does the claim provide a roadmap? Whenever you make that claim, what points are good? What evidence is there related to those good points? See, this is a vague one. Saying, I feel that Representative Wall's position was better supported because she has a lot of good points. That's great. But I need more specifics. Good points because it's backed by data, because it has research to support it, because it makes more logical sense. There's a couple of reasons why we need to know why those points are good. So get a little more specific than just saying this argument is better because it has good points. There's really 5 things you need to look at to prove that evidence. 5 elements you're really looking at. First, you're looking at logical reasoning. Does it make sense? They say that, like the economist, the revered, professional, exceptional economist is a good place to read this article. Well, that's kind of just circular. It's saying it's good because I say it's good, not because it really is good or bad. There's not really an outside authority on situations like that. But if it comes from a study or something from a university, or this town did it and it worked, but that town did it and it didn't work, whatever the thing is it logical? Does it have an emotional appeal? Does it use really weighty, biased language? Exceptional, wonderful, terrific, great, terrible, ridiculous, outlandish. What type of words are they using? Are they using words that try to play to your emotions? Do they actually use facts? Do they say, well, because this plan worked in this town, it should work in this town also? Yeah, that's a fact. Sure, you could follow along with that. Do they use actual data? 10% of people surveyed said. This study from 2009 says this, but this study from 1970 says that. If you have 2 studies like that, I'm going to go a little more with the 2009 one because it's more recent. Also, look at expert knowledge. Who is speaking? What do they have to say? What dog do they have in this hunt? What is their purpose in writing this in the first place? There's a good example about kids like 10, 11 years old using cell phones that's out there somewhere. And the first person that argues is an executive for a cell phone company. Of course, he's going to say that kids need cell phones because his job is selling cell phones. You could set it up and say this is the supporting evidence. It's good because this study said so, that study says so. It works in this town, it works there. This one says this study says no, this study says it's bad. Even the article over there said that there were some issues with this. Then you make your decision. Which one's better? The one that supports the idea, the one that opposes the idea, and then why? Does it have better data? So use those transition words, things like whereas, which is a conjunction, thereby, because of, or by means of. These are really good words that show that you're relating the information together. So, a couple of things to remember. You have 45 minutes. Don't rush through it, but be sure you plan your response before you write it out. Think about your argumentation. Tell me why this article is better. Not because you like it, but give me real reasons why. Determine the positions presented. Explain why you picked the one you did. But the better one is not necessarily the one you agree with. Build on those main points. Use multiple pieces of evidence. Use your transition words. Organize your writing. Choose your words carefully. Use varied sentences. Use short sentences. Use medium-sized sentences that help. Use really long sentences that you can go on with for a long time and really show that you can demonstrate your command of the English language. See what I did there? So do that. Reread and revise your response. Check that punctuation. So you write a complete essay. That's one of the ways you get points. You have an opening, you have your argument, you have your closing. You want to have anywhere between 300 and 500 words of writing. That's really what you want to do. because this can only help you. If you write nothing on the extended response, you may end up with a 139 or a 140 or a 142. If you write on the extended response, it can only help you. Give a commentary on quotations. That doesn't just mean the author says this and that's good. The author says something, and you can say, in argument one, the author argued about raising taxes, uh, but then he doesn't really support that argument later on because whatever he says. Develop those ideas. Go back to them. Don't copy text. Copy text contributes to your score only if you explain how the text illustrates. Don't just say, this person said this and it means that. That's not picking a side. You need to pick a side and set up an argument. Yet again, you look at that grammar. Make sure your grammar's good. Punctuation is very important. A couple of keys to remember. The claim guides the argument. Convince the reader. Use things like because, therefore. Say that whichever claim is better supported and tell me why. Do not summarize. They do not want summaries. They want to see you do higher level thinking where you've analyzed the readings, that you've actually taken the time to compare them and decide which one is better. Use the data and the logic. Does it make sense? Are they just making a circular argument? Are they saying that this data is good because it's good data? Or are they really making sense with it? Explain why the evidence supports the claims. If you need to paraphrase, but do it lightly. Don't just spit it back out there. Decide who did a better job. That's really your job here. You're picking the author who does the better job. And remember those 5 types of evidence. Finally, pick one side, stick to that side, acknowledge the other side. This other side gave good points on this, and this, but tell why it's better. Avoid personal information. Don't really get into, well, my uncle plays games also, and so that means that he's an expert on this. That doesn't matter. And don't say me or I. Be very formal with this. The first argument is better. Don't say I feel like it's better. Just say it is.